Welcome along, everybody, again. It's Christine here from Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. And I'm really rapt to welcome back Shilpa today. We spoke together 5 or 6 months ago, it was, about homeschooling and finances. And I knew then when we were talking that there would be more things that we could have to talk about. So I've invited her back, and specifically we're going to start to talk anyway about how the year's gone for her and what her plans are. But first of all, Shilpa, welcome back, dear girl.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me back.
Would you like to give us a quick overview as to how the other half of your year went? What you expected to happen that just happened, and what happened that you weren't expecting? How's the rest of this year panned out for you, Shilpa?
Let me see. I guess the way things have gone, I was expecting my kids to maybe study a little bit further with their home education, but they actually ended up they got an apprenticeship. They actually got an internship first, and they've been working on an internship most of the year. That has ended, and I believe they may be getting some paid work from that company. We'll see where that goes. And now they both have apprenticeships and with two completely different companies. So it's kind of gone, it was actually unexpected, but I'm really pleased for them, obviously. And actually, I helped set them up. So, it's not a bad thing at all. Actually, I'd say both my boys, they are still studying, but they're studying obviously a lot less, and they're being more specific about what they want to train in. One of the apprenticeships actually with a tech company, so he will be getting really good training and if he does well, they'll actually train him as an engineer or a designer, depending on how he does and which way he wants to go. And to some degree, my other son is going to actually get training as well. It's just in a completely different area. It's kind of more humanitarian. He'll be studying a lot as well, but it will be not home education anymore. It will be more work-based and what he needs to train for his career.
So I guess you could say then that your homeschooling days have just finished.
I mean, yes and no. It has happened a lot sooner than I expected. But with my younger son, he still wants to do some training in maths, actually. And my husband is a mathematician, so that really helps. And we're kind of looking at whether he's just going to, go and do a degree in mathematics or just train. Because either way, as long as what he's interested in is other skills. So there is still a little bit of home education going on, but for the most part, not really, which is quite interesting. And it has happened a lot more abruptly than I expected. I was kind of expecting this to happen maybe next year.
Well, I think that that's also part of the beauty of homeschooling too, isn't it? We make our plans, but there's a measure of flexibility in it because sometimes opportunities come up. And if it's the right opportunity at the right time, then you pivot.
I think that's exactly what's happened. And that's actually what's happened all through our home education journey anyway, is that when an opportunity would come up, we would just take it as long as it fit in with our lives and fit in with where they really wanted to go. But they both have completely turned around with what they were doing. And it was because opportunities presented themselves.
So they've ended up with some internships. So you mentioned just a few minutes ago that you were involved in maybe initiating, introducing, networking in the internships. How did that come about?
I know a lot of people. And like I actually do know a lot of people, not just because I've lived all over the world, but because I've done a lot of humanitarian work. I've worked in drug abuse and psychiatric abuse, human rights. I've worked in a lot of different fields. And I happen to have friends who own companies, and I have approached them. I didn't even approach them for my boys, actually, funnily enough. It, again, came about by chance. It was during a conversation that myself and my husband were having with a couple of friends of mine who my husband actually has done work for because he's a software engineer. And they happened to mention something, and my husband, and it just kind of carried on from there. And then they went, okay, we'll hold you to this. We're quite interested in this. So, and they knew that my boys were quite bright and quite keen and enthusiastic. They took them on and gave them an internship.
And already you've seen the fruit, if you like, of deliberately going about throughout one's life of forming networks of mutual benefit, because not only is it a really practical thing to do, that they form friendships. There's always people that you can go to, like you say, and ask for help or a recommendation. And so many people are willing to do that. And that's fascinating to me that you have been able to put something like that into place, and it's been born out of your habit over the years and your natural abilities to form good networking. And the companies that your boys have gone to must be delighted to get boys that they know how they were raised, are perhaps familiar with some of their homeschooling. So they've already got a sneak peek, if you like, that they're not coming to them unknown. Is that correct? I'm assuming that, but is that correct?
One of the companies, yes, the other one, no. The first company that I'm talking about, they're an Australian company, and I've known the owner for, I don't know, maybe 18 years. They wanted to give my boys a chance because I think they know what I'm like. And they met my boys and they were super, super excited with how they presented. Like you said, with the home educated kids, they do come across very differently. And they loved the fact the boys were home educated. They loved the fact they were both athletes. They loved all these different things. And it isn't just my networking. Yes, you could, a lot of people would say, okay, Shilpa talks a lot. And so she knows a lot of people, and she is the reason that the boys had this opportunity. And that is partly true. Obviously, my boys have to live up to that. And so the whole way through the internship, I was coaching them as well, just on the side. And they knew this because I would be involved in the beginning when they would have meetings with the owners. I would sit in on some of on the meetings just to kind of get an understanding of what was going on. And then when the boys were getting on with what they were doing, I would coach them a little bit about like how to write emails and how to present themselves, how to work. Like if someone gives you a job, how fast you need to get it done, just making sure that they were on track. Once I saw that they were actually doing quite well on their own, I just left them to it and I didn't even bother anymore. But they've also been learning about networking. So I've been teaching them about networking, and I've been getting them to network and also pick the right people. It's not just about talking to everyone. I mean, yes, you can talk to everyone and anyone, but who do you keep in your network and how do you expand your network? This is what I find is the beauty of home education. When I would talk to people, they would sit in, and when people would come over to the house, whether it was as a friend, or whether it was socially or in another capacity, my boys were often around and they observed what I did. And I've noticed they copy me. I don't actually have to teach them a huge amount. They've observed what I've done and they copied it. And I would say for anyone who isn't good at networking, and I'll give you my husband as a really good example because he's the total opposite of me. He's learned how to network now. And he's actually really, really good at it. And in some ways, he's better than I am. I had to unteach him about certain things, if that makes any sense. Whereas with kids, they don't know anything else. So they just kind of watch what you do and do that. And the reason I'm saying this is because I do know lots of parents are quite daunted by the idea of networking and talking to lots of people, or they don't see the point or whatever. And so I'm just wanting to point out that if you can do that with an adult, I believe you can teach a child more easily. And a lot of it is just being a good role model and setting a good example because they'll actually watch what you're doing.
So I think there's two things to take from this. Let's say as the first big lesson of the interview, we'll say, is that teaching your children how to network is actually a valid strategic plan in your home education. That for sure they're going to observe and absorb by osmosis and just watching you in everyday life. That's part of the unspoken beauty of homeschooling, is that there's no way it's only all about books. It's about learning through life, and there is no better teachers in life than your parents. That's why we're homeschooling them, right? So the first lesson is, don't let the networking lessons or opportunities go to waste. Don't let it happen by accident. Actually be strategic about it. The second thing closely aligned to that is the motivation for networking isn't just about why is it good for me or my children. It's also about, well, how can I serve other people too? It's reciprocal. It's repellent to people when they sense that you're only out for what you can get.
Exactly. I totally agree. Actually, that's a really, really good point. I'll give you an example. I was asked to do a drug lecture and it was really far away and I wasn't too keen on going because it was quite a rural area and transport was going to be quite difficult, many, many reasons. And it was going to be quite expensive to get there too. And I thought, you know what? I was told they were really looking forward to me coming. So I went and it was fantastic. Now they want they want training for everyone in their organization on drug education because they're having problems in their community with drugs and alcohol. So sometimes I will go and do one thing to help somebody because I really want to help them. And I end up meeting all these people, and my kids end up meeting them too. But they've observed that that's what happens. And then if you do need any help, they're there for you. That's not how I go about it. I don't go there to help them expecting something back. But I've found that later on down the line, it really does open up my network.
There's no doubt that there is this natural human element in our relationships that when you are with other people and you are looking for ways to serve them and helping, there's kind of like some kind of like emotional currency involved there too. And it would be so easy to be cynical and assume that people are just kind of doing it to stock up all these favors that they're going to call in one day. And that would be kind of an unfortunate negative side of what is humanity in it. But the most important part of it is that if you're focusing on what we're doing for other people, things do get returned to you. And it's a blessing. You bless other people and you get blessed in return too. It's not a guarantee, but that's not why we're doing it, right?
And
Yeah.
it doesn't always come from in the same direction that you gave it to, if that makes any sense. So if you're helping in this direction, you might find that you get help from another direction. I've just found people have always been so willing to help.
Something that we were told some years ago, well, for our children's sake also, was that most people, successful business people, etc., are more than happy to give you some time if you're genuinely interested in hearing from them. Tell me how you became successful. What do you recommend I do? And busy people will put aside time for that. And I hadn't considered that at that time that they would be willing to do that because they're these really busy, successful people. Why would they want to give up important time that's worth money to them? But they do.
Exactly, but my sister had a fantastic way of doing this, and she's done this since she was pre-university. She would find somebody she really wanted information from, and even if she didn't know them, and she would go up to them and say, "Could I buy you a cup of coffee and pick your brains?" And it's very flattering that people, for the other person that she wants to learn from them. And I always thought that was a really nice way of getting help from people. When I was at university, I don't even remember how this came about. I was doing some kind of creative writing course, and I ended up calling an author. And she was just so flattered that somebody took an interest in her writing and called her up and wanted advice.
I did exactly the same thing a couple of weeks ago. I contacted a woman whom I'd been meaning to, but kept procrastinating because I believed that she wouldn't really want to hear from me and she'd probably say no. So, rather stupidly, I was again more focused on me rather than the other person and more worried that they were going to turn me down. And so what if they did say no? The chances of somebody being really rude back to you as they're declining your request are pretty slim. But then, much to my surprise and delight, she said yes, and she answered me really quickly. She was flattered and grateful that I'd taken an interest in her book, and we're meeting for an interview. Even at my more mature age, I'm still learning these things. So, as homeschooling families, if we can help our children to kind of get over the shyness or the mistaken belief that somebody who doesn't want to hear from you, they're just going to say no. Well, they might, but it's still worth the risk, especially when you're trying to do something on behalf of your children, because that's why we're homeschooling. We're doing this for our children.
So, because in my head, while you're talking, in my head, because I'm connected to so many other home educators, I can imagine parents going, but what about this and what about this? And my son is like this and whatever. And there's one thing that's come up a few times with different parents, and that's kids who are so shy that they won't talk to anyone, or they are stuck in front of a book or a screen or something like that. And I just wanted to give a short example. So I'm very outgoing, that is true. My kids have learned that. That is also true. I also realize that there are parents who are not quite as extroverted, and their children follow that family, of being quiet and maybe not being quite as extroverted. And that's also fine. So my younger son, went through a phase, and I can't even remember how it started. He was always very extroverted, but both of my kids actually but there was a period of time where my son started getting nervous about socializing. But it got to the point that we would have somebody over, and I actually often invited people over. I had one or two families or even groups of people over a week, specifically to network and to socialize. And my younger son got to a point where people would come over and he would be sitting with a book right in front of his face. And thankfully it was a book, not a screen. It got to the point that he would be sitting at the dinner table with a book, and just everywhere he could, he would just be walking around with a book. And while I wanted to encourage reading, because that's great, and he is a complete bookworm, there's more to life than just reading books. You have to have skills, you have to interact with people, you have to learn other skills. We got to the point that we said, look, we validated his reading, but we said, it's really inappropriate. And I understand that you're finding this very uncomfortable, but what we've observed is that when people come over, or when you don't want to have to deal with things, you stick your head in a book. So as your parents, we are taking the book away when it's inappropriate. We didn't ask his permission. I think he was maybe 13 or 14 at the time. So anyway, we would have people over and say, okay, so the book is going now. And sometimes he'd go and get the book again. And I'd say, okay, the book is going. You need to go and say hello. You're the host. You need to go and actually say hello. And it took a while, but he got over it, as all of us do. And this is the thing, is too many parents mollycoddle their kids and go, oh my gosh, this is too hard for them. But I can't think of anywhere in life where I have expanded and grown where it wasn't a little bit hard or too hard. Like, there was always something difficult to overcome. He gained his social skills back, because the problem was, there was also a feedback loop here, was the more he was stuck in a book, the more he lost his social skills. And then the more he lost his social skills, the less willing he was to talk to people. And the less willing he was to talk to people, he would then stick his head in the book even further, and so on and so forth. And so this just broke the cycle, and he's grateful for it now. And I just wanted to put that there, because a lot of parents are a little worried about, oh, well, my kid doesn't want to. Okay, but when I was 14, 15, 16, gosh, even when I was 19, I didn't make a lot of correct decisions. Obviously at 19, I'm old enough to start, making mistakes and working my own life out. But there are some things as a parent, because I have met 40-year-olds who cannot shake my hand and look me in the eye without shaking. And I've helped other people's children too with the same thing. There was a home education group I'd set up, and there was a girl who used to stick her head in a book. And I actually said, again, it was for her benefit. And her mum didn't mind. And I said, look, there are people here. This is for your benefit. Let's take that book away. But then I also made sure that I was in communication with this girl and made her feel comfortable and made her feel like she actually could interact without needing a VIA or without needing something else.
I do think it's the duty of, we'll say homeschooling parents here, because that's who we're talking about. Home educating parents, it's your duty to ensure that your children are well socialized. I don't think it happens by accident. Yes, it happens by observation and the examples that you set for them. And I don't really think it's got anything to do with, oh, but they're shy, or, oh, but they don't want to do it. You're the adult, they're the child. It's your duty to help them work their way through that very difficult time in their life. There's nobody else that loves them as much as you do, who has their best interests at heart. As they move into adulthood, they need to have those skills once they get there, at least in a rudimentary form that grows and blossoms once they're into adulthood. But it's not going to be very easy for them if they are struggling right from the get-go because we have coddled them, as you've said, Shilpa. So I would encourage parents to be brave, be the parent your child needs, even if it means that you're going to have some unpleasant situations between you and the child, because you have the best in mind for them. Because imagine if you hadn't have done that to your son, Shilpa, and now he's looking at going to an internship and he hadn't learnt and grown in those social skills, he would not be looked at very favorably from somebody looking for the best person in their company.
Well, I can tell you now, I know exactly what he would be like, and he would have been extremely anxious, actually. Now people are super impressed when they talk with him. They always tell me how much they love him, but including these particular business owners, they would actually end up having meetings with my sons and getting into getting into stuff that was nothing to do with the business because they just enjoyed talking with him. And that wouldn't, I know my younger son wouldn't have been comfortable with that had I allowed that to continue. And it was for his benefit. And I've seen what happens when adults haven't dealt with this, how hard it is actually for some of them to get jobs.
It's also an opportunity for parents who may, through no fault of their own, not had that opportunity to develop those skills either. Because as you're working through this with your children, you get the opportunity to grow in certain areas as well. Now, talking about the internships themselves, when you were looking down the track when the boys were little towards the possibilities for when they finished homeschooling and they would go into the next phase, did you actively plan that internships might be a possibility? I mean, because what have you got? You can leave school and go and get a dead end job. You can go to university or you can go and build some skills, in this case, maybe an internship. What was going through yours and your husband's mind when you started to prepare for looking for opportunities for your boys? What place did internships have in your preparation?
They didn't at all. So I come from an Indian background. I was born in New Zealand, but my parents are Indian. And if anyone here knows what Indians are like, education and a big paycheck are the most important things for your children. And so my parents were absolutely horrified that I took my children out of school. I mean, my dad was saying, I will pay for private school, anything but this. He was absolutely sure my kids were going to turn out stupid. He would even test them to prove to me that they weren't learning anything. And the funny thing is that they'd always pass. So it was quite funny, actually. I remember him losing money once because he said to my son, can you do this? I'll give you £5. And my son did it really fast. And he went, oh, I didn't expect that. He solved this problem. Anyway, the point being, when you have that kind of pressure on you, number one, it's really hard to hold to your integrity. Number two, your plans can unfortunately be colored by what everybody else wants. My viewpoint had been, okay, I'm going to educate them. And the whole way through, as most home educators do, I was worried if I was doing the right thing and whether or not I was actually, making a mistake, this kind of thing. Over the years, I worked out that it was not a mistake and it was the best thing I've ever done. But through this whole thing, I've had my family in the background because it is a big deal if your children go to university and it's expected they get high-flying jobs or very well-paying jobs, doctors, lawyers, accountants, that kind of thing. University was in the back of my mind because I, had the viewpoint, okay, I'm going to prove them right. I'm going to prove home education correct and prove that what they're saying is incorrect. And my kids will make it to university and they will do well. We've been home educating for almost 11 years now. And I think after 11 years, we've evolved with it. We've changed with it. And I've calmed down about this because it's me that has to calm down and me that has to withstand the pressure. And also my parents calmed down because it took many, many years for them to see it, but you have to have persistence and perseverance. So if you persevere and you have patience, it will come right. And my husband has a master's in maths, very academic. He was going to do a PhD. Like he's on that, he was on that trajectory. And he actually said he didn't agree with the education system. He said, look, if the boys want to go to university, we're not going to stop them. But it's not the best use of their time or money. So I changed my viewpoint a few years ago, kind of went, okay, well, let's see how it goes then. I'm not fixed on it one way or the other. If they want to do that, fine. If they don't want to do it, that's also fine. So I don't know, but when you make a decision, things start to align. So that's kind of what's happened is we just went, okay, so where are the boys going to go now? My younger son does want to go to university, to be fair, but he's also not fixed on it because he is able to study maths to quite a high level with my husband. And really, it's the skills that he needs, not the piece of paper. And as shown with the internship and the two apprenticeships, people actually love the skills that my boys have.
For the companies that have offered internships, was there an expectation for how long the internships would last? Was there a contract involved? How formal is the arrangement?
Okay, so for the internship with the Australian company, that was very informal. It was, let's see how this goes. There was no time limit. They knew that this was very new. The boys have worked before. Sure, they've earned money, but that was, they were unskilled jobs. Whereas this was their first skilled job. Obviously, it wasn't paid. It was an internship. And it was quite open on both sides. It was like, okay, well, let's see how this goes. And let's see if they do well. It was quite hard work, by the way, because it wasn't essentially what it was. It's a company that writes courses online, but they use a specific study method. And the book that my boys had to read was written by a medical doctor. And it was written for the layman, but there were a lot of advanced terms in them. That's why they knew it would take quite a long time to get through. And the boys wrote the course based on this book. And they would have meetings every week to see how they were going. And it got to a point that they saw that the boys were doing actually quite well, that they said, look, we don't need to have meetings every week anymore. Because the boys took less than a year, I think they took about 8 or 9 months to complete it. They didn't expect the boys to get it done within a few months. That wasn't realistic, but they were impressed with how fast they did get it done. So there wasn't a contract. With the other company, it is very formal. They've signed NDAs. For my younger son, I actually had to sign it with him because he's a minor. We haven't actually gotten through that process yet. I'm just waiting to hear back, but there will be contracts. So then once the apprenticeship's over, then, again, it depends on how well they do. But that's kind of what I've been training the boys for, which is it doesn't matter where you go. It doesn't matter who you're working for. It doesn't matter whether the job is paid or not. You do the best, you do things to the best of your ability, and you do them as well as you can. And you give, and you don't slack, you don't, take shortcuts. You do the best job you can. And they've observed that every time they've applied this, people come back and are really happy with the work they've done or really impressed or have offered them something else.
Based on what you know of internships, do you think there's a typical way that companies and business people go through the process of putting an internship in place?
I mean, I'm probably not the right person to ask, to be honest. I know when my husband before he had his first paid job straight out of university, he had an internship and it was unpaid, as many of them are. They'll get free work out of a graduate for 6 months. I think he did sign a contract. It was formal. It was for like an insurance company. That's the only other experience I have of internships. I've never really done one myself.
Then it's going to be fascinating to hear how your boys go and navigate this whole process, because more and more I'm seeing that the alternatives to the typical university expectation are becoming easier. There are other alternatives to pursue a career or a set of skills. And this, I think, is another avenue that our teens can go down.
Yes, I think it's becoming more common as well. A lot of companies aren't impressed with graduates. They have textbook knowledge, but they don't actually know how to apply it to the workaday world, and particularly from the viewpoint of a business making money. And I think that's why these companies liked my boys. I mean, this is going to sound silly, but I remember going to a careers fair a few years ago in Auckland, and there was a company, and they were explaining that they would find it very frustrating that graduates fresh out of university couldn't write letters, couldn't write properly, couldn't spell. just basic things like that. And I think with home education, even if, let's say, you're not very good at it, I actually happen to be, but I have met parents who say they're not. And I've coached those parents and said to use this as an opportunity, like you've explained before, to learn how to write alongside their child because the books are there. They just have to use the same books their kids are using and they'll learn with them. And I find that, I mean, I can't speak for all home educated kids, but I know at least with mine and their friends, they can, write properly. And that makes a huge difference. It doesn't sound like a lot, but I think companies, because everyone has to communicate and you can't go up and phone everybody. You actually have to write to people. You have to email, you have to send communications. The other thing is it looks very unprofessional if you're writing to clients and you can't spell or punctuate.
So, one of the things that I am hearing from you is that the opportunity to take up an internship should not be sniffed at. It's a highly valid alternative to uni because if you got a good internship and you were being mentored well at a company, I think the chances are very high that you could be, gosh, just as qualified would be the lowest bar, but you could actually be more qualified because you'd be working along the business people in the environment that you would be in should you have gone to university. Afterwards, you would have been brought up and trained in it as you're going through the internship. And I'm being presumptuous, but I think an internship probably includes a lot of mentoring at the same time.
For my boys, for their age, definitely, that is what has happened.
Mm. So I've heard from business people many times when they take on a graduate, they have to retrain them anyway.
Exactly.
So,
That's exactly what I was getting at. I'm 46. I know a lot of people my age who didn't go to university because back then not everyone was going, like that was around the time where people were starting to go to university in larger numbers. But I actually have met so many people who are around my age who have really good jobs. And when I find out, I dig in, and this is the thing with networking is I ask lots of questions and find out about people, and it's fascinating. I found out I've met so many people who started off with internships or apprenticeships straight out of high school. What they explained to me is that when their friends got out of uni, they were already well ahead, and then there became this trend of everyone having to go to university in order to get a job, and you had to have a degree. But now everyone has a degree. So what makes you stand out? And I have heard from various places of business owners actually liking home educated kids because they know they're not going to be your typical school kid, a typical university graduate. So I guess I think it depends. There are parents who are very set on their children going to university because that is the done thing. And, I know my parents were expecting it, but I think they got over it. I think my parents just assumed that because they're home educated, they would never go to university. At the end of the day, it's not about me proving my parents wrong. It's about me making sure that my kids are educated and that whatever they do in life, they're doing what they enjoy, they're doing what they're good at, and they're doing things to the best of their ability. Whether that's through university or not is down to them, actually. I had a conversation with my parents last week about these new apprenticeships, and I was surprised they were really happy about it. They haven't mentioned university to me once, which makes me think they probably assume that home educated kids are never going to go to university, even though I did tell them years ago that that's not the case. But yeah, I'm really pleased that they've gone in this direction, and I'm fine with it so long as they're actually doing what they are good at and what they enjoy.
well, when we strategically bring up our children, and that is what you do when you choose to home educate, because of the what you have to do to get an exemption, etc. There aren't negligent homeschoolers. I've yet to come across one. You have to be purposeful and be planning ahead. So more often than not, parents are doing a really, really good job of it and they're training up their kids. And by the time that they are into their teens and heading out the other side, they're resourceful. They know how to research should they have to go and need to learn something else because it's a life habit for them. Shilpa, I'd like to pivot now and put the spotlight on you. You've been talking about your boys and what they're going to be doing now, but clearly your homeschool days have pretty much finished. So you said it happened quicker than what you thought. Tell me what it was like as you realized that this time that you've put aside for 11 years was fast drawing to a close. What was going through your mind when you realized that this was happening?
Well, the funny thing is, I thought I'd be sad about it because when, earlier this year, I kind of was seeing, we spoke about this actually. And earlier this year, I kind of thought, oh, it's going to be a bit sad when it ends. And now that it's mostly ended, it's not fully ended, but it's mostly there, I'm not because I'm still spending time with my children. I still see them. One of my sons will be actually moving out of the house because his apprenticeship is away, and my other son will still be living with us. And to be honest, I'm not sad about it because it just feels like a really natural progression. I wasn't expecting this. I was expecting to be upset about it, but it's given me so much more time to do the things I want to do. But how there's always been this line out there, I'm just going to say out there, that when you've been home with your children for so long, your career is over, or you're not going to be able to go back into the world of work easily, that kind of thing. So I was worried about that. I've had 4 job offers. People love the skills I've gained from home educating. And when I put my CV together, I was actually surprised myself how many skills I had and how many things I'd done. Because during home education, I've done other things because I have done a lot of community work. Like I say, the drug lectures, all that kind of thing. So I have done a lot of things on the side in bits and pieces. But when you add it up, it's actually quite substantial. It's a little bit like when I used to do a home education log for my kids, and we would log everything we did because I thought, wow, we're not really doing that much. And you'd log it, every single thing we did every single day. At the end of the month, I looked back and went, I cannot believe how much we actually did. It shocked me. Like it would even just be conversations in the car about a particular subject. I put that in the log, and you suddenly put, the picture becomes more apparent. Same with the CV. I'm actually going to be doing things I really enjoy. At the same time, it's only I've chosen to work part-time because I do still want to help my son with his apprenticeship. If he needs me, chances are he won't need me actually, but I still want to be there. I've suddenly got plans for all these things I'm going to be doing. Most of them are not going to be with my children. Some of them will.
I've regularly said over the years, even before we homeschooled, I very quickly viewed motherhood as a career. I did not stop a career to be a mother. I changed careers.
Yes.
It was like getting a promotion. It's a good attitude to have that motherhood and being a home educating parent is an amazing career. What are your plans?
One of the things I will be doing though is helping my husband with his business because I can. I have been helping him in bits and pieces, but now I actually have some time. And I am going to be learning skills that are also quite fun and skills that I have been desperate to learn and things I've been wanting to do for quite some time. To be fair, I did do these during the last few home education years. Like I said, I have a part-time job, and I specifically chosen the part because I was offered full-time jobs as well as part-time ones. I chose the part-time one because it's more flexible. I'll be working with some really, really good people. So I'm quite excited because it actually uses a lot of my background in public speaking, acting, coaching. To be honest, the funny thing was they were actually really interested because of the background I have with home educating and coaching other people, coaching my own kids.
I'm also getting the strong sense, and I feel this along with you, that at the end of the homeschooling career, I am a completely different woman than I know I would have been had I never pursued that path. I'm more me. I've blossomed. I'm more intelligent. I'm more curious and able. I'm more confident. I'm more skilled. And I wasn't expecting any of those outcomes. And I think that is as you go through these homeschooling years, because of the demands and requirements on you in this career, it's inevitable that you're going to be so much more by the time you're finished and so much more capable.
I think you're spot on. I think you're absolutely spot on. Actually, now that you mention it, you're totally correct. Yeah, I have had the same experience actually. And it wasn't what I was expecting. Like I said, it was only when I put that CV together, I've realized how much I've gained from home educating my kids. And it was a bit of a surprise. But also, like you say, confidence and many other things. Like I know I'm already extroverted, but there's a different type of confidence that comes from knowledge and comes from experience. And that's probably why it's been so easy for me to shift gears because it's I'm not I'm very smoothly moving on to the next phase without it being upsetting, without it being odd, without it being difficult.
I was interested to hear that you expected to feel sad when it was all over, and to your surprise, you're not. I think there's a difference between grieving for something that we leave behind and looking back with wistfulness and yet a satisfaction in a job well done. Mm.
Yes, it's like leaving. Exactly. That's actually what it's like. And I don't even know if I feel wistful anymore. Like I said, I had expected it. When you look forward and you think, well, what's it going to be like? But it's been because I haven't lost my kids. Like I haven't got anything to be sad about. In fact, if anything, it's a celebration.
Yeah, true.
It would be very different. I would feel wistful if they'd maybe done badly or they weren't doing well in life. Then I would be upset. But actually, and we've been through our rough patches like anyone, you still have a family, kids are still kids and we're still human and we have problems. But whenever I've had problems, I've gone to friends or home educators who I know are wiser than myself in certain areas. And we've gotten through it, and my kids are actually thriving now. They're doing very well. I think rather than being wistful, I'm quite excited for both them and us.
Yeah, there is a contentment and satisfaction to look back and go, oh, wow, I did a good job.
Yeah, a surprise. I did a great job, it's particularly because when you first pull your kids out of school, you are petrified that you won't.
Yeah, you spend most of your homeschooling years always constantly looking over your shoulder, worried about, are you going to mess your children up or not? But you do the best you can with what you've got, and then you can entrust your children to go out into life confidently because you know you've done the best in imparting not only a really good education, but values and morals and good people skills and everything else that is so important to you when you choose to home educate your children. I'd like to wrap up and come back a little bit. We've implied a lot of advice and help tonight in our conversation, but can you just pull it all in, perhaps a little bit in conclusion, and give some thoughts to homeschool mums that have still got a few years down the track of this? How would you advise them to finish in confidence and with little regret?
Okay, my advice would be trust yourself. You know what you're doing. Don't worry about what everyone else is doing because their kids are different and their family is different, and you do not have to be doing what they're doing. If one family's kids have gone to university, great, that suits them. If one family's kids have gone into the world of work, that suits them. If one family's kids are doing apprenticeships, whatever they're doing, it doesn't matter. It's what suits your family. Because it's really easy to fall into the trap of, well, this is what everyone else is doing, because we have been brought up to do what everyone else does and to follow the crowd. But just think about it from the viewpoint that just by home educating, you're already not doing what everyone else does. So you're already out of the box. You do what works for your family and your kids. But I do encourage parents to please, if you have enjoyed home educating, or if you see a change in your children and you do see that the kids have done well with it, do stick with it. It's really hard sometimes. Like I know so many parents who have wavered in this either because of outside pressure or because their friends' kids or because their children's previous friends are all still at school. If you work at it, your kids will do fine. And if you've just got to stick with your choice and just do what you know is correct and trust your instincts. Because as the parent, you are still the best Nobody's ever going to care for your children as much as you do.
And that is a lovely way to finish. Thank you so much, Shilpa. That is going to bring encouragement and hope and certainty to parents to keep on keeping on.